Hey y'all, today it's Iyslander versus Fi, and let's get right into it. My opponent won the die roll and has chosen to go first. That's good for two reasons. First, it denies me an arsenal, which is very big for me. And secondly, Fi is actually surprisingly really good at leaking in damage even on turn 1. Because, stuff like Phoenix Flame, and they go really wide. They go wide with small attacks, so, you will still leak some damage in if you, try and block out. So yeah, let's get into this. And so in this game, my game plan is very different than my previous video. In this game, the Frost-Hex game plan just simply does not work because, well, it's too slow. You will die before you're able to get the enough Frost-Hexes out on your opponent. And yeah, so they are still in the deck because, after all, they are blue ice cards that block for 3. So they're still in the deck. But my game plan is not to stack Frost-Hexes on my opponent. Instead, my game plan is a little more tempo-y. It's a little more like mid-range tempo. I'll slow my opponent down a little on their turn, and on my turn come in with like a red attack that is disruptive in some way, like a red Aether Ice Vein, CNC, Erase Face, stuff like that. So, yep, let's see how that works out. Okay, opponent starts with Spreading Flames. So with a 4-card hand, this isn't too scary. Although, I mean, a Phoenix Flame, actually, it immediately buffs a Phoenix Flame, so it kind of already is a 1 for 4. But if they manage to get another small attack in, it gets another buff. Thankfully, we did draw a Blizzard, which is really nice, because in Iyslander, Blizzard taxes your opponent 3. And my opponent is 5, so I don't expect the blue density to be very high. So, go ahead and Blizzard. Hopefully this stops the rest of the turn. And indeed it does. So, that's pretty nice for us. We managed to not leak any damage turn 1. And then we draw up, and we do draw a Frost-Hex, so I do end up playing it here just because, I didn't take damage to put out this Frost-Hex. It's basically just a free Frost-Hex. But it's definitely not part of the game plan. Like, if this was any other turn, I would not have taken damage to try and get this Frost-Hex in play. And I have to say, this is one of the things that I really like about Iyslander, is that your power cards in different matchups actually look very different. Iyslander definitely rewards you for making sure that you have a solid game plan into your different opponents. And for that, you really need to know what your opponent is trying to do. Honestly, in some ways, it reminds me a little bit of Viserai. Just in terms of like the flexibility of switching between game plans. For example, very easy example in Viserai was like, when you go aggro, you don't usually bring and read the runes, except when you're against Dash, because if they put a Dissolution Sphere on you, you're going to really want the read runes to like set up for a few turns until Dissosphere is gone. In Iyslander, an example is like Hypothermia. Like, Hypothermia against Fi doesn't actually do much. It's not really a power card, because most of the stuff naturally is Go Again. It stops the weapon, yeah, but aside from that, it doesn't really stop much else. Good Fis will probably play around it as well. So, Hypothermia not a power card into Fi, but amazing against like Briar or Dromai, who don't have lots of natural Go Again cards. So, in that sense, having a solid game plan, having a flexible game plan, knowing what your game plan should be into different matchups, to me makes Iyslander a very exciting hero to play. So yeah, on our turn, all we did was set up the Frost-Hex, and we pitched a Defense React to just Waning Moon our opponent, so I could arsenal a blue ice card. And then we go ahead and respond to our opponent's first attack by giving them 2 Frostbites. And we go ahead and block it. The reason we definitely want to block Rising Resentment, because, when it's a first attack on a Chain Link, usually against other heroes, the discount obviously doesn't matter, because they can only banish a 0 cost from their hand, so making that cost 1 less doesn't make a difference. Unless your opponent has Frostbites, in which case they're letting that hit basically lets them pay for a Frostbite for free. So, normally I would like to block the second attack in the chain because of the mask. You stop the second attack. But because there's a Rising Resentment, this hitting basically undoes one of my Frostbites. I decided I need to block this. Okay, we caught our opponent on an all-red hand, which is nice. And then they just come in with a Phoenix form. This does not have Go Again, and is just 3 damage, which we will go ahead and take, so that we can go ahead and Waning Moon our opponent. So for example, if a similar situation like this came up against Oldhim, for example, I would not have taken the damage, because I know I just need to because I know that the turns I want to take damage on is when I'm setting up Frost Hexes or Insidious Chills or whatever. But since I'm against Fi, I'm like, I can take damage, deal damage, and just keep up this mid-rangey game. On our turn, yep, we go ahead and activate the Peak, and we're going to be arsenaling a Channel Lake Frigid, which is a power card into Fi. And obviously a garbage card against like Guardians, whereas Frost Hex is amazing into Guardians. Channel Lake Frigid, not so much. Okay. Opponent pitches the Snatch. All right, and we draw into 2 reds. Not the best. Yeah, not the best, but we still have a blue for this turn and a blue for a blue for my opponent's turn and a blue for my turn. Opponent starts with a Minimism, and we go ahead and instant speed up the channel. I pitched I only had one choice of what to pitch there. I had to pitch the non-ice card, so that on my turn I can pitch the ice card to keep the channel around. And you might be wondering what this rounds on me is doing in the deck. Well, I'm not 100% certain about its place in the deck right now. This is still testing. But the theory is that into Fi, into aggro decks that go wide, such as Fi, it does actually block a decent amount. Like, say, if they go 4 Chainlinks wide, 4 or 5, you will block 4 or 5 damage just from that. It gives them an extra card, but it also gives you an extra card, which, if you think about your cards block matching their card's attack, given that their card's attack also has -1 on it from this rounds on me, you that part cancels out, but you still got -1 on everything else. So it was a bit of a theory I wanted to test out. And the other thing is that the floor of the card is still really good. It's a blue block 3, which is kind of exactly what you want. So, there isn't much of a cost to put in the deck. And against Guardians, they swing at you with a hammer, you give them an extra card, it doesn't matter. Right? Because, they don't really go wide. The extra cards for them don't usually do much. So, yeah, it's a card I want to play around with. I don't think I actually used it at all this game. But, yeah, there we go. That is the theory. Anyway, so opponent came in with a Blaze Headlong after the Minimism. Note that Minimism does not buff Blaze Headlong, because Blaze Headlong's base power is 4. And we went ahead and defense reacted it anyway. Just because we had the 1 float, and I don't want to arsenal the defense react, because it doesn't do much in the arsenal for Iyslander. And this means that on our turn, we still get to pitch an ice card. So we go into Tunic, and we hit our opponent with an Erase Face. And this is what I mean by a tempo-y sort of game plan. We took damage on our opponent's turn from the Ember Blade to be able to do this. We also took damage from the Belittle. Yeah, to be able to do this. And this means that our opponent's next turn is probably going to be really weak, because there's a channel on the field, and our opponent doesn't have any Draconic benefits, because they got hit by an Erase Face. But then our opponent starts with a Belittle, which is just amazing into Iyslander. Well, it's honestly just an amazing card in general. Like, into Iyslander, Belittle is basically a 3 attack with Go Again that gave my opponent 2 resources. Which, when I'm trying to tax them, like, an extra 2 resource tax is actually pretty significant. So that's pretty frustrating. And then they come into the Flamecall Awakening. Like, the fact that they can do this through a Channel Lake Frigid when they did not have an arsenal is just, makes Belittle just an absolutely insane card. Also, against other aggro decks, instead of being a 3 attack that refunds you 2 resources, it's a 6 attack, because it finds you a Minimism, and so many attacks in Fi attack for 3. So it's a very easy include in Fi, in my opinion. And in our hand, we had no ice card, so we just blocked with a red Aether Ice Vein, and we have a CNC to follow up, so we're good. The opponent pays 1 into the Phoenix Flame that they fetched out with Flamecall Awakening. And we can go ahead and take that. Right, so there's a bit of a mistake here, actually. The Phoenix Flame should have been attacking for 0, because my opponent does not control any Draconic Chainlinks because of Erase Face. Once again, just one of those things that happens when you're not completely familiar with the new cards yet. Yeah, we forget that Phoenix Flames +1 is the one that's dependent on Draconic Chainlinks. So, yep, I went ahead and took 1 unnecessary damage there that I did not need to. But that's alright. And there we go, and we just follow with a CNC. And this is what I mean. We're going to play a tempo game plan into our opponent. Just efficient, disruptive attacks on our turn, slow them down a little bit on their turn. And because I'd set up the Channel Frigid plus Erase Phase the previous turn, even though I went into my opponent's turn not having an arsenal, I was able to, survive, but my opponent wasn't able to do too much damage to me because, well, Channel plus Erase Phase. So then that gave me the space to come in and attack this turn and get my arsenal back. Okay, so we do the CNC and our opponent just takes it. I mean, Fi blocks really badly. Like, pretty much all of Fi's cards block for 2. So if they want to not lose the arsenal, they would have to give me 3 cards, so yeah. And then our opponent comes in with another Belittle, which is just absolutely devastating because we have a blue Aether Ice Vein in our arsenal, which, would tax our opponent 2 if they let it hit. Which, I mean, they only have AB2, so it will definitely hit. So I know I'm taxing my opponent at least 2. But, with Belittle finding them an extra blue every time, that tax just feels a lot less impressive. So, yeah. I could have responded to the Belittle search trigger by playing the Aether Ice Vein, but my opponent already has 2 floating. So I was hoping, and maybe this was just too much of a false hope on my part. I was hoping they might get greedy and find a red Minimism because they're like, oh, I already have 2 floating, I'll be fine. So I sort of gave my opponent the opportunity there to misplay, which they didn't take because they're a good player. So yeah, they went out and found a blue anyway. But if I had done this before they searched, I guess odds are they would have just taken extra damage and then pitched the floating 2 that they had instead of losing any cards in their hand before they found the blue Minimism. In this case, what happened is that they used their 2 floating to block 2 of the Arcane, took 1, and then pitched the blue Minimism to pay for the Aether Ice Veins effect. Okay, then my opponent comes in with a Rising Resentment. And yeah, at first they were thinking of coming in with a sword, which is why, they popped the tuning counter and everything. But then, they realized the sword wouldn't have go again because there was no Draconic Chain Link. So you come in the Rising Resentment first, and then the sword. Oh, and then they finish off that chain with a Snatch, which is painful because I was, with this hand, my plan is just to Erase Phase them, hope that slows them down enough for me to get my arsenal on the following turn. But with a Snatch, well, I mean, I still need to do that. I would lose way too much tempo by not playing this Erase Phase on my turn. So I go ahead and use my Tunic to pay into Ironhide and just lose the Coronet Peak. So opponent does give us a block here, which is pretty surprising. But they still take 4, and the Erase Phase hit trigger happens. Yeah, I mean, they blocked with the Spreading Flames, which would have been absolutely, pointless after getting hit by an Erase Phase, so I guess that makes sense. And then they come in with a Mounting Anger. This Mounting Anger does not have an on-hit, because they have no Draconic Chain Links right now. They have 0 Draconic Chain Links, and Mounting Anger allows you to banish a card from your hand with cost less than the number of Draconic Chain Links you have. Since they have 0 Draconic Chain Links, they only banish something with cost -1, which does not exist. Then they come in with the Emberblade, which does not have go again, because they have no Draconic Chain Links. And yes, we're able to do what we wanted to do, where, we gave up our arsenal the previous turn to come in with an Erase Phase, hope that buys us enough tempo to do something significant on our turn and get our arsenal back. Yep. So we go play this red Aether Ice Vein, and we fuse it with the Cold Snap. This is 5 Arcane, and will force a discard from our opponent. Again, this is one of those cards that's really powerful into Fi, less powerful into Oldhim. Because, fine, they might leak some damage because they probably don't bring AB5, but they very easily can pay for AB3 and pay for this and still come at you with the hammer the next turn. This doesn't phase them too much. But into stuff like Fi, it's amazing. So we get a discard from our opponent. They discard a Flamecall Awakening. And we draw up, and immediately when I look in his hand, I want to try and decide what I'm going to Arsenal. And it's going to be either the Winter's Bite or the This Rounds on me. Because Insidious Chill, just like Frost Tech's way too slow in this matchup, I will not be able to set that up and benefit from it. So that gets pitched here. I can see what I draw. We draw into a blue Sigil of Permafrost. That's another thing I'm testing right now. I'm not sure which colors of the sigils I want and how many. I want to try the blue. And yeah, opponent does not pay for the Cold Snap, which means the arsenal is frozen, and we do get to draw a card. And we're still floating to do a Waning Moon at the end of this, so that feels really nice. Rising Resentment's coming in for 3, and same concept as last time. If I let this hit, my opponent can banish the 0 cost from their hand and play it through the Frostbite. So I decide I'm not going to let this hit, and I go ahead and block with This Rounds on me, which means I'm going to Arsenal the Winter's Bite. And then the Ember Blade, we can let this one hit. Cool, and then the Blaze Headlong, and before, you know, and I respond to it like before it's on the chain to Waning Moon them, so they can't buy back a Phoenix Flame to, you know, pay for AB. Just a minor thing. I mean, it's likely that we're just going to attack with the Phoenix Flame anyway, because it does threaten a mass trigger. But yeah. So this would be the third attack to hit in the combat chain, so I have to use... Well, I mean, okay, I don't actually need to block with Tunic here, because they already have an arsenal. But I believe I go ahead and do it anyway to deny the mask. Yeah, because the Phoenix Flame has Go Again. If they draw a 0 cost Go Again thing, which Fi has plenty of, I've just taken a bunch more damage by letting the Phoenix Flame hit. So, yep, go ahead and lose the Tunic. Our turn, we get to CNC, get to Arsenal Winter's Bite, which will slow our opponent down even more. And it's getting to a point in the game where they need to be scared of Storm Striders and Waning Moon. So opponent goes in and takes 6. Again, like I said, if they want to, you know, stop the CNC hit, they would need to give me 3 cards. They did consider giving me the Mask of Momentum, but they didn't end up doing it. I'm guessing it's because they... I think they sort of saw the writing on the wall, and they were like, they were just hoping that maybe I didn't have enough disruption on this turn, and they would just need the mask to be able to push damage. So they start with a blue Rise from the Ashes. We throw out the Winter's Bite, making them pay 1 and giving them a Frostbite. And then the Rise resolves to get a Phoenix Flame back. Okay, and then they belittle with their 2 floating that they had, paying through the Frostbite, and they reveal a Phoenix Flame. And now I do respond to the belittled Surge. Because my opponent has no floating, I know one of their cards is a Phoenix Flame. It's likely that the other card is also a red. So I'm going to use this moment to Waning Moon and see whether my opponent has a different blue. Like, before they get that blue Minimism in their hand, let me attack them. Before they have resources to adequately pay. Yep, so I go ahead and pay with this Amulet of Ice into the Waning Moon. And my opponent responds to my instant with their own instant, playing an Out of War with the Tunic counter. And here's the thing, you have to declare your modes from Out of War when you cast it, but of course the modes only happen upon resolution. So, you know, my opponent has declared that they're going to banish and draw 2, and give +1 to their attacks this turn. So the thing is, I know that that last card in the hand is a Phoenix Flame, so I'm going to use my 1 floating to activate Storm Striders, and go ahead and do this Ice Bolt for 3, which means that my opponent has to pitch for this. Because if they don't, they will go down to 1, which means a Waning Moon on the stack will guaranteed kill them because they only have AB2. So they have to pitch for this. They have to pitch their attack out of their hand, but they've already chosen the mode of Banish and Draw 2 on the Out of War. So, you know, they can pitch it, and then when the Out of War resolves, they've just lost one of their modes, basically, because they no longer have an attack to banish. And the belittle gets +1, I guess, but, you know, the Waning Moon resolves and they will die anyway. So, yeah, so that was the game. Definitely a very different game style than the previous video. With Fi, you just need to be on the more tempo-y game plan and just come at them, just keep disrupting them on their turn and on your turn. The key thing is that when you disrupt them on your turn, you need to do it while dealing damage. The problem with the Frost Tech's game plan is that you disrupt your opponent more, but you don't deal any damage to them. So whereas they are leaking damage into you, if they're a hero like Fi. So this is a game plan that I feel like you have to do. Right, so the first time I played against it, I was like, maybe I can disrupt them enough and get the Frost Hex thing, but it just didn't work. They were way too quick. It also depends a little on where your Frost Hexes are in your deck, so that's a little that can be a little inconsistent. Whereas against a Guardian, you know the game's gonna go long, you will see your Frost Hexes. So yeah, that was the game. Thank you for watching, and hope you enjoyed it.